Hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. And this lecture is all about SES or Simple Email Service. So let's begin. So what is SES? Well, SES or Simple Email Service is a cloud-based email service and it supports both sending and receiving email. So it can be used to send marketing emails, transaction emails, and email notifications from your applications. And it uses a standard SMTP or Simple Mail Transfer Protocol interface, but it can also be accessed using an API and the AWS SDK to allow you to integrate with your existing applications. All connections from your EC2 instances to the SMTP endpoint must be encrypted in transit using TLS or Transport Layer Security. And there are 3 different SMTP endpoints that you can use when configuring connections into SES. And I'm going to just show you the documentation, which talks you through connecting into the SES SMTP endpoint. So this table shows us 3 different endpoints. So there's one in US East, US West, and EU Ireland. And it's this endpoint here that your EC2 instance will need to connect to if it wants to send emails using SES. And when you configure access to SES for your EC2 instances, you need to configure the security group associated with your EC2 instance to allow connections to the SMTP endpoint. And by default, it's port 25. That's the default port for SMTP, which you probably already know. But what you may not know is that EC2 by default, it throttles the email traffic over port 25. And you can raise a request to get your limit increased. But the quickest way to avoid timeouts, and this is what most people do, is instead they either use port 587 or 2587. And that's really the main thing that you need to know about SES for the exam. It's very important to know those ports. So the default port is 25, but if you want to avoid timeouts, use 587 or 2587. And those are the 3 default ports for SMTP in AWS. So moving on to our exam tips, you really only need to know SES at a very high level. Just remember, it's a cloud-based email service and it allows you to configure your applications to send email notifications using a standard SMTP interface, and there is also an SES API and SDK. Remember to configure the security group associated with your EC2 instances to allow them to communicate with the SMTP endpoint, and port 25 is the default. But to avoid throttling and timeouts, use either port 587 or 2587. And definitely do try to remember those 3 different ports for the SES SMTP endpoint, and then you should be able to answer any question they throw at you in the exam. So that's it for this lecture. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.